Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we are going to be looking at the M901. Now this was a user mission created by MuhAbroomz, so I'd like to thank him for creating this for me, and also on top of it for Gentlespie for creating a very similar mission as well. So thank you to both of you guys for letting me test out this vehicle using your user missions. On top of this, what I'm going to do in this video is talk about the M901. Remember, this is one of the Squadron vehicles which is going to be coming to the game pretty soon, and hopefully we'll get a bit more information on how the research is going to work when it comes to the individual activities of the individual players. Then I'm going to go through some history of it and everything like that, but if you want a TLDW, I suppose, of this thing in the game, it's going to be incredibly map specific in my opinion. So let's get into it. The M901 ITV, or the improved tow vehicle, it's a tank destroyer which uses the BGM-71 tow anti-tank missile. This vehicle was used in US armor and anti-armor strategy during the Cold War, and it were proliferated for several other nations and remains in service abroad even today, showing how prolific it is, mainly because of the chassis that it's built upon. Anyway, the ITV was not a product of long-term planning, and in fact the US Army was reluctant to procure a modern ATGM vehicle at all. Other NATO nations and the Warsaw Pact rapidly developed and fielded armor and highly mobile ATGM vehicles in the 50s and 60s. The US military was slow to catch on with the concept, which didn't really materialize for them. Maybe they didn't see the point in it. The US tank destroyers of the era all employed either recoilless rifles, such as the Ontos that we see in game, or simple ATGM launchers for use by dismounted infantry, so stuff like the M150, and all of which offered pretty much no protection to the crew. So this trend changed quickly after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, when the Arab-operated tank destroyer variants of the BRDM-2 Scout car, which is of Soviet descent, armed with pop-up ATGM launchers, inflicted significant losses on the IDF's tank force. This demonstrated the use of the ATGM carrier in modern warfare, and that meant that it prompted the US Army to finally initiate serious research and development into such a vehicle. The Army decided to take the same approach as the Soviet Union and base the new vehicle off an existing lightweight, high-mobile AFV chassis already in widespread service, which would be, of course, the M113, which is one of the most produced vehicles ever when it comes to military service. So since the Army already had an ATGM vehicle based on the M113, which was the M150 at the time, the new weapon system was designated as the Improved Tow Vehicle, or the ITV. So 3 years after the Yom Kippur War, competing manufacturers submitted 3 fully functional prototypes to the US Army, so very prolific in that regard. And in December of 1976, following field trials, the Army declared the model submitted by Emerson, now which is Systems and Electronics Incorporated, the winner, and awarded a low-rate initial production contract of only 10 vehicles. The favorable field trials of these vehicles resulted in a contract for full production being issued in June of 1978, with the resulting M901 ITV being fully operational in 1979. So its production was pretty much, well, we're only really talking about a weapon system here, but even just for the weapon system, we're talking around, what, 3 years to make sure that it is fully ready and combat going. The other US Army services turned down the ITV, with the Marines soon after opting instead for the LAV-1, armed with the same turrets, resulting in the LAV-AT, which is another thing that we could definitely see coming to War Thunder. When the original M901 was fielded, it employed the M113A1 chassis, and few M901s were built, as production quickly switched over to the M113A2 in '79, which fitted the tow under armor launcher to the chassis, which resulted in the M901A1. Now understand that in the game we only have the M901 right now, or at least that is what it's labeled, so I'm hoping that it is the M901 instead of the M901A1, but the basic difference between them that I can tell is that the M901 ITV on the M113A1 chassis would have fielded just the TOW 1 missile, whereas the M901A1 would have fielded the TOW 2 missile on it, showing that in game it would be a hell of a lot better, right, than the previous one. Now, what is also a little change from in-game is the M901 also carried a 7.62mm general purpose machine gun for defense against personnel and aircraft. The weapon used by the US military was either an M60 or an M240, depending on the service and the era, and though almost any general purpose machine gun could be fitted instead. This is something that we don't see on the vehicle in War Thunder. There is no machine gun, there is only some smoke launchers instead. So the maximum armament was 10 TOW missiles and 2,000 rounds of 7.62, and this does not include loaded ammunition. So technically this thing should be able to have 12 TOW missiles in total, with 10 in the hull and 2 in the breaches themselves. All of the data is the same as that, so the M113 with the M901 being based on the M113A1 and the M901 being based on the M113A2 and the A3 being based on the A3, you get the idea. But the main combat experience of the M901 was during Operation Desert Storm. It achieved at least 14 kills with no losses, and in a repeat performance of the anti-tank BRDM-2s had accomplished 18 years prior, showing how useful this technology was even in Operation Desert Storm. This also occurred despite the low confidence in the M901 held by the US troops at the time, and even after the war, showing its success, there is still at least at the time, the confidence was not high in it. It's just a very odd thing. But yeah, after Operation Desert Storm, it isn't known whether the ITV has been used since, and I'm pretty sure it hasn't been used in an open combat situation. So the production ran from 1977 to 1998, and there was 3,315 of these constructed for all users, including Bahrain, Egypt, Greece, Jordan, Morocco, Pakistan, Portugal, Thailand, Tunisia, and even the US, of course. And the largest operators at present, so today, would be Egypt and Greece with around 300 ITVs, and the last buyer to date was Thailand of the machines. And the US Army actually retired all of the remaining examples in the mid-1990s after the ITV had been in service for around about 15 years, and as of late 2015 the US Army is the only operator that has retired this system. And this was done under the idea that the M2 and M3 Bradley had taken over the ITV's mission, and but the ITV was more of a defensive vehicle by nature. Underlying the purpose of the Bradley is to support the MuhAbroomz main battle tank while on the attack. So it seems kind of odd that you have two things which you use for two different tactics, but you get rid of one of them in the hope that the Bradley can take over, the job of the other one, which I believe it could at the end of the day. So when it overall comes to it, none of the other nations which have exported versions of this M901 have retired them and are remaining in service today. So it would make sense for them to be in service in the foreseeable future as well. So all of these is definitely, there's still a ton of them knocking about, just not from the US military point of view. So why, to me, is this a good vehicle to pick for a squadron vehicle? Well, as we talked about, there are versions of it, the M901 A1, A2 and A3, which, or sorry, A1 and A3 I should say. All of these are similar to this machine, but better as well. So if we want a standard tech tree equivalent of this machine, we can easily get one. Now, a lot of people have talked about how it also looks a lot like Wall-E, you know, the character out of the animated film, and I would completely agree. What I also found through testing is that its elevation and depression of its main targeting system is incredibly good. It's also mouse guided when it comes to the ATGM, and on top of this, because of the position that it's mounted, you can hide the whole hull and just stick the top out above either hills or above bushes and stuff like this. What it also means is, because it's really tall, you have the fact that your 3D camera is a lot higher than usual, or at least it was when I tested it. And what this means is you can see more going on around you, which can be a really big thing, right? It can be a really good and impressive idea to have, because it means you have better look around the place. Now, it still has the obvious issues as the tow launcher does on the Italian side. It's still an M113. It will get strafed out, it doesn't have a lot of armor on it, should kind of get hull broken. It also has the problem of not being able to fire on the move. The one which is on the user mission right now does not have that limit. It doesn't have that maximum speed that you can fire at, but I'm sure that once this comes to the game, it will do. Otherwise, you'll just see these things pinging around, shooting their ATGMs at, you know, other stuff. And without a machine gun, it has nothing to defend itself against aircraft or helicopters, unless you want to try and fling an ATGM at them. It also only starts reloading one of the ATGMs once both of them have been fired, so that is something to take into account. And with the 4-man crew, the survivability of it isn't great, because they're all sat in a line with 2 loaders at the back, the commander gunner in the center, and then the driver at the front. Overall, I can see this machine being really great at holding down areas that you've already taken, but in War Thunder, the vehicles that do well are the vehicles that push themselves out, become aggressive, and take points and then hold them there. So you're going to have to wait for a vehicle to do that in the M901, and sometimes it's not the best idea to rely on your teammates when you can be the one who is pushing forward the ideas. What is also interesting is, if we go to the article about these squadron vehicles, this is labeled as a rank 6 vehicle, which seems exceptionally high. I know that rank 6 doesn't really mean anything when it comes to BR, but you can see a general idea of you know, what a rank 6 vehicle's BR will be, and for me it just seems too high for it. I would actually knock it down a little bit, since of course I believe the tow vehicle for the Italians is rank 5, and I don't see too much difference between the functionality of the two. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.